welcome back to Salesforce admin training sessions. So in this session, I'm going to explain you about the relationships that we have in Salesforce. But before actually directly jumping on the relationships that we have in Salesforce, I will explain you what are relationships in general when we actually talk about database management system, so that you will have a proper understanding of what are the kind of relationship that we have and why do we need to maintain relationships in in different ways, in different tables, so that you will be clear with the concepts. And then we will actually jump onto Salesforce, that how do we define relationships in Salesforce. Basically the fundamental is almost same. The only difference is that how we are maintaining that in Salesforce, how do we actually manage relationships in Salesforce. All right, so we are going to go ahead and we'll understand the basic concepts, and then we'll go we'll jump to Salesforce concepts. All right, so let's have a look at the agenda. So the agenda for the session is that why do we need to create relationships? Why do we need different tables? What are the types of relationships that we have? What is the fundamental behind primary key and foreign key? And what do you understand by foreign key in Salesforce? All right. So first of all, let's just understand that why do we need to create relationships? Okay. So basically there are two reasons. Let me first highlight the reasons that why do we need to create the relationships. And then before I actually start explaining you that why do we need it, I'm going to give you an example of few tables, and then I will explain you with the table so that you will understand better that why do we need it. All right. So these are the two basic reasons of actually creating a relationship. So the first one is data redundancy. The second one is data consistency. So let's just understand these 2 points with an example. So I have created two tables for you. So here, if you see, I have two tables. I have an employee table and I have a department table. If you see in employee table, I am maintaining all the information about employees, right? So this is, for example, this one, the first column is employee. So I am assuming that you would be knowing these basic level of detail, but I would still explain. So this is nothing but a table. This is one table. This is another table. And this is called a row. And this is called a column, right? And whatever resides inside the cells is called data. So that is how you actually define a table. Okay. So now I have this employee table, and in employee table, if you see, the details that I'm maintaining is employee ID, employee name, employee phone number, and employee email ID, right? So similarly, I'm maintaining the same kind of details for each and every employee that I have here. Okay. So I have listed 5 employees and I have different employee IDs, their names, phone numbers, and email IDs. And similarly, in an organization, if you would be knowing about these things, there are different departments, right? So I have similarly created a table for department wherein I'm maintaining different details of a department. For example, department 1, and what is the name of the department, who is the department head, and what is the phone number to reach out to that department. Okay. And similarly, I am maintaining the data for 4 other different departments. So department 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. All right. So I have two tables. Now the question was, what is data redundancy, right? Repetition of similar data. Now just imagine that let's say employee 1 Robert. Okay. So employee 1 Robert belongs to department technology D2. Okay. And now let's say Angela who has an employee ID of E3. Angela also belongs to department 1, and let's say Ceci belongs to department 3. So I'm just going to write it here for you. So let's say department 1. Okay. And then this person is also, he also belongs to department 1. Let's say this person belongs to department 2, then department 2, and then department 3. And similarly, you'll have a lot of employees listed in your table, and then you will have every employee will actually belong to a department, right? So now just imagine that if I wanted to maintain everything in a single table. Okay. Let's say if I wanted to mention that employee 1 Robert belongs to department 1, so just mentioning the department ID was not enough, right? If I wanted to mention every detail, then I would have mentioned department ID, department name, department head, and phone number, everything into the same table, right? So let's say I mentioned all this information over here. Okay. And then again, I would have been repeating the same information for this employee, right? Because this employee also belongs to department 1. And if there are other multiple employees, let's say if there are 100 employees who actually works for department 1, so for 100 employees you would be repeating these set of information, right? So these kind of repetition of data is called data redundancy, and you should be basically avoiding such kind of data redundancy, right? And that is the reason that we should be maintaining such information into a separate table, and we can just mention a reference key here, right? That which department this employee belongs to. Now let's just imagine that if I create another column here and I just mention that employee 1 Robert belongs to department 1, then I simply have to go to department table, and if I want to access the department info, I can access from this table, right? So this is a better way of managing it, correct? So this is called data redundancy, right? So that is why you actually create another table and then create a relationship between these two tables. So don't worry, I'm going to tell you that how you actually create a relationship between these two tables. Okay, for now let's just understand, just like keep the concept of data redundancy in your mind. Okay, now the second point was data inconsistency. Okay, so data inconsistency, let's just imagine the same case that I have just one table. I have employee information, and in this table itself, I also have the department information, department ID, department name, department head, and phone number. Now let's just imagine that for technology, the department head changed. Okay, Jeffrey was replaced by someone else. Okay, now, or let's say his phone number got updated. Any other information, any kind of information that is getting updated for department 2 or any other department. So what will you do in that case? Because you know that if this information is maintained into this table itself, then just imagine if there is an employee, if there are 100 employees which belongs to department 2, you have to make that update. Let's say if you want to update the department head or phone number of department 2, then you have to make that update into 100 records. That's right, correct? So let's just imagine that you forgot some to update some of the records, because if you are updating the same reference again and again in a table, then you might miss some of the references, right? So that will actually lead to data inconsistency, and in order to avoid that, this is the best way to avoid it, right? So rather than segregating everything into one place, not segregating, keeping everything into one place, it is better to segregate it into a different table, so that let's say if there is any update that is supposed to happen in department 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or anywhere, you can just update the source here, and that would be enough, because right, anybody who would be saying okay that this employee belongs to department 2, so you only had to update the source. So if anybody goes to department 2, they will see the updated information, right? So rather than updating the records at different, at multiple places, you just updated the source, because you have kept the department data source in a different table, right? So that is how you can avoid data inconsistency. All right, so these are the two reasons that why we actually create relationships to maintain and manage your database system better. Okay, so these are the two reasons. Now let's just go ahead and see the next topic. The next topic is that how many kind of relationships do we have in database relation, relational database management system, like in general, if you're maintaining any kind of data, no matter what language it is, then what are the kind of relationships that can be there? So these are the types of relationships: one to one, one to many, many to one, and many to many. Now let's understand these relationships from these two tables one by one. Okay, so I'll start with one to many, and then we can go ahead with the other relationships. Now let's say I'm just gonna remove this. So let's start with this. Okay, so let's say your employee 1, Robert belongs to department 1. So Robert works for department 1, which is accounting. Now just imagine that if can an employee work in multiple departments? No, one employee should be only working in one department. It's not possible that Robert is also working for accounting and then he's also working for technology. Okay, so basically Robert can only work for one department. Okay, but is it the case that one department will have only one employee? No, that is not the case, right? So department 1, accounting department, can have multiple employees, right? So basically, if I give you an example, so department 1, accounting department, can have Robert as well, can have Angela, can have Mark, right? So basically, one department can have multiple employees, but one employee can only work for one department, right? So what is this kind of relationship that you will call? So one department will have multiple employees. That means one to many, right? Many employees can work for one department, and one department can have multiple employees. Okay, so that is so in this case, this will have a from, I mean, if you see from the department to employee side, it is going to be one to many, and from employees to department, it is many to one. Okay, because multiple employees can work for one single department, and one department can have multiple employees. So this is the kind of, like, this is how you have to break it down in order to understand that what kind of relationship does it hold. Okay, and in generally, like, when you actually define a relationship, the way you mention it, let me just try and draw it for you. So insert, hold on, maybe so let me just keep it here. Okay, or let me just try to open the whiteboard and then I can explain you better. Or I think this is perfect. Okay, so one department can have multiple employees. Okay, and this is how you actually annotate a relationship. Okay, if you see two tables or two objects in Salesforce, in, like, maybe like in your schema builder or somewhere, by seeing this you will be able to understand that what kind of relationship exists between two tables or objects. So in this case, this is one to many. One department will have many employees. Okay, so this was the this is how you actually define a relationship, and this is how you break it down and understand. Now the other relationship is one to one. Okay, now in one to one relationship, if I give you an example, let's say here Robert. Okay, so Robert will have only one phone number, or you can say Robert will have only one email ID, right? So I don't need to create two tables in order to maintain the employee name and the email ID, because it is one to one. So for a one to one relationship, you don't need to create a different table, or you don't need to create, like, maintain it in a different object. Okay, so it can be maintained within a single table, and that is nothing but a one-to-one relationship. Okay, it is like the most at the most granular level. Okay, so that is how you can actually define a one-to-one relationship. You can just mention a one-to-one relationship in a single table. So one employee will have one phone number, one employee will have one email ID, and that is why we have kept all of these information into a single table. That is nothing but a one-to-one relationship. Now the fourth one is many-to-many relationship. Okay, so let me give you an example of many-to-many relationship. Okay, so let's say that if you would have seen, like, if you're working in a company, or let's say if you're still a student, right? So let's say in your college there would be multiple groups, or, like, multiple activities. So I'm not actually switching to student college example, but I'm going to take the same example. Let's say if there's a company, there are employees, and there are different activities in the company. Let's say there's a people and culture group, or, like, there are there are, like, few kind of activities, right? For example, people actually participate in extracurricular activities, right? Let's say some people are participating in a dance group, or there are people who actually are participating in a paint group, or, like, there are different kind of groups for different activities. So what will happen in such cases? One employee can be part of different groups, right? So for example, if there's Robert can be part of a painting group, and Robert can also be a part of the dancing group, right? So he's not limited to just one group. He's allowed to have, like, to participate in multiple groups. Okay, but can you say that if Robert is part of the dance group or the painting group, can Ceci not be part of the dance group and the painting group? She can be, right? So basically, multiple employees can be part of multiple groups, and multiple groups can have multiple employees. Okay, so if there is group one can have multiple employees inside the, like, inside group one can have Robert, group one can have Ceci, Angela. In fact, like, everybody can be part of group one. And similarly, if you see it from the other side, every employee can participate into multiple groups. One employee can be part of group 1, 2, 3, or, like, as many groups as he can, as per his capacity, like, how many activities he can do. So he can be part of different groups. Okay, so that is how like, that is just an example of many to many relationship. Don't worry about it when we actually start the topic of many to many relationship in Salesforce. I'll explain you in brief, and I'll show you that how you actually create a many-to-many relationship in Salesforce. So don't worry about it. For now, just keep the concept in mind that with each and every relationship, what are the kind of examples that you can keep in your mind as a base, so that it will help you to understand any other requirement. All right. Now let's just go ahead and check out the other topic. All right. So the next thing is that how do you there's a concept of primary key and foreign key when you actually talk about relational database management system. Okay. I mean, if you have worked on SQL or any other database management system, then you would be knowing what is a primary key and what is a foreign key, right? So let's just start with a primary key. So let's say this is my employee table, and so primary key is something that helps you to uniquely identify a record. Okay. So let's say if somebody comes to me and they ask me, let's say I have access to the employee table, and somebody comes to me and asks me that, you know what, I need details of Angela. Okay. So can just by the name, can I actually go to employee table and give the details to that person? There might be four people with the same name, Angela, right? Because name is not unique, correct? There are like different people can have the same name, right? So what is that one thing which is so unique that I can ask, and using that one particular information I can fetch out all the details? That is nothing but the employee ID, right? If somebody gives me the employee ID, that employee ID is E3, and I want the details of that particular employee, so I know that employee ID is kept unique. So that is how, I mean, that is nothing but that is uniquely identifying my record, right? So anything that uniquely identifies the record is called a primary key. So in this case, employee ID is the primary key. And the same logic goes with the department ID. Okay. If somebody gives me the department ID, I can fetch out all the details of the department uniquely. All right. So this is the concept behind the primary key. Now comes the picture of foreign key. Now let's just say that I want to associate these two tables. Okay. So, okay, so there's another concept before we actually jump onto the foreign key concept. So let's say if you want to create the relationship, because now these two tables are very two different individual tables, right? Just by seeing this table, you cannot figure out that which employee belongs to which department, because I have not maintained that detail here, right? So here I would need something as this, right? Department ID. Okay. And here I can just give D2, and then let me just hold on. Let's say D3, D1, D2, D1, and D5. Okay. So now, if, all right, 1 second. Okay. So now I have this information in that. Now, if somebody sees this table, they will be able to know that which employee belongs to which department, right? And if they want to know the department details, they can simply go to the department table and can fetch out the details. Okay. So what is department ID in this table? Department ID is nothing but the foreign key. Okay. Because this key is actually giving you the information that information, and using that information, you can actually go to the other table and refer this ID in order to fetch out the details from the other table. Okay, so this is nothing but the foreign key. Now, the other question is that how do we actually maintain the foreign key in Salesforce? Because primary key is going to be the same, because if let's say if you're in Salesforce and you have created an object employee, you are going to simply create an ID field, or let's say a number field for in order to maintain employee ID, right? But how do you actually create a foreign key in Salesforce? In order to create a foreign key, because this foreign key does not only hold the data for like a static data, D3, D1, D2, it should actually show you the details. If you actually, let's say if I open an employee record in Salesforce, and if I have opened the record for Robert, where I'm seeing his employee ID, employee name, phone number, email, and I'm also seeing his department ID. Let's say it is written D3, but if it is just a static data D3, then is it really convenient for the user to actually go and then open the department object and search for department 3 and then check out the details? No, it should rather be something wherein just user just clicks on that particular information, the moment they click on D3, they should be navigated to this table, correct? So in Salesforce, in short, in Salesforce, in order to create a foreign key, you do not simply create a field, but you create a relationship field. Okay, so you would have heard about a master detail, you would have heard about a lookup relationship field, right? So those kind of fields are nothing but the relationship fields in Salesforce, and that is how we maintain the relationship between two objects in Salesforce. Okay, so if somebody asks you, it could also be an interview question. If somebody asks you that there are two objects, and how will you actually establish a relationship between two objects in Salesforce, then your answer should be that you have to create a relationship field in order to connect two objects, or in order to establish a relationship between two objects in Salesforce. All right, so overall, if I summarize everything, now you know what is a table, or the same thing which is called an object in Salesforce, and what is a primary key, what is a foreign key, okay, and why do we actually create relationships to remove data redundancy and to maintain data consistency, okay, to remove data inconsistency, right? What was data redundancy? Let's say if I have to maintain the same information in the same table, and if, let's say, different employees belong to a same department, then every bunch of information you would be repeating, right? So repetition of data, we don't want that in our information, right? So in order to remove the repetition of data, we create a relationship, right? We create a different object. All right, and then second thing was data inconsistency. If you are maintaining everything in a single table, and let's say if there is an update, and wherever that information is referred, right, in whichever rows it has been referred, you have to maintain or update that particular update in each and every row, right? Wherein you can actually, that can actually lead to data inconsistency, because if you forget to update some of the references, then that will actually that is nothing but the data will be inconsistent, right? Because you updated somewhere and somewhere you did not update, and that is also very hectic, and it's not actually a very smart way of managing your data, right? So this is the basic knowledge about relationships. And then of course we also saw how many types of relationships are there. So in the next video, I'm going to take each and every example of one to many, many to one, and then many to many. One to one relationship, you already know that we don't need to create a different object, or we don't need to create a different table, because as I said, right, Robert will have only one email ID, right? So there is no need of creating another table just for the employee ID. No. So one-to-one relationship, we don't need to create another object or table. Okay. But for one to many, many to one, and then many to many, we'll see that how we can establish or create those relationship using relationship fields in Salesforce going forward. All right. So this is it for now. I hope that you understood the basic concepts. And if you have more questions on the general, the general topics of relationships, that if you did not understand any of the concepts, you can drop a comment in the comment section, and I'll try to respond. All right. So that's it for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next session.